Last year, Michael Andretti won a kart record 8 races to take the PPG Cup, symbol of the IndyCar Championship. Now the 31-year-old Michael waits for the first race of 1992, prepared to defend his title. He carries the number 1 on his car, symbolizing the champion. His team has changed power plants for the new year, with the new Ford Cosworth XB on board. It is but one in a season of changes. The Penske team of Rick Mears and Emerson Fittipaldi have newer, smaller, more powerful engines as well, in brand new cars. And Bobby Rahal left Gallus Racing to buy Pat Patrick's legendary team. He will drive a new Chevy-powered Lola. Danny Sullivan, the Alfa Romeo driver last year, now takes Rahal's chair at Gallus Racing. His teammate will be the 1990 champion, Al Unser Jr. Both will face the season challenge in stylish new Galmers. The IndyCar drivers are ready, the slate is clean, and the first point toward the championship is about to be earned. ESPN, the world's leader in motorsports coverage, presents Speed World. You're looking live as the Pacific Ocean rolls in on the beach here at the end of summer. Well, it's the end of summer because we're down under in Australia. And the end of summer here means the start of the 1992 IndyCar season. Hello and welcome to Surfers Paradise, Australia. I'm Paul Page, and we're ready to kick off another season of IndyCar racing with this little preview for you. And while we start here, the final round of qualifying for this weekend's race is underway about 3 stories down behind me. We're in a great position that overlooks the start-finish line. Now, before we jump ahead to 92, let's consider a couple of extra facts about the 1991 season. With Michael's incredible record of 8 victories and leading 46% of all the laps, it still took him all 17 races last year to come up with his championship. The historians tell us that's the most exciting season since back in 1959. And as far as fans are concerned, well, there was an increase in attendance of nearly 12%. 9 of the 17 races actually had record attendance last year, so more race fans enjoyed the Indy cars in 1991. Now, how could it possibly be better in 92? Well, believe me, it can be. There's a number of changes that are occurring that are really going to make this an incredible season. First of all, let's consider some of those different changes in both engines and cars. With me is Indy champion, the first man over 200, Tom Sneva. Tom's with us because our normal colleague Derek Daly is driving the last race of his career at Sebring this weekend. Tom, first of all, we've got, after a 20-year absence, the Ford Cosworth engine back in the series and the XB power plant and Michael Andretti and Mario Andretti's car.
Well, Paul, you talked about how we can make it more exciting for the fans. The American tradition of Ford against Chevrolet is one thing we're going to see in IndyCar racing again this year. The new Ford package, much tidier, smaller, very keen on aerodynamics. The way to go faster in this sport nowadays is all around the aerodynamics of the car. Smaller packages can make the underside of the car more efficient, and that's what we're going to see this year.
In the meantime, Chevrolet hasn't been sleeping. The Elmore Engineering Company has developed a new engine that is titled the Indy Chevy V8B model, and it's in the Penske cars.
Well, it is, and it's in a Penske car that was designed around this smaller package. We won't see that early in the season from the Ford people, but the Penske group has put together an entire package, a smaller, tidier motor around a car that was designed for it. Aerodynamically, it should be the most efficient thing out here right now.
Another engine has a little new life. They've given some more boost pressure, more turbo pressure to the Buick engines.
Well, they have. I think this is good. It's going to get more competition to the racetrack. Last year, they were short of cars a few times. This will increase the competition. It might be a little bit of a teaser. I don't know if they gave them quite enough to be as competitive as they'd like, but it'll get more cars at the racetrack, and that's what we need.
And a lot of new chassis, new Penskes, new Lolas. There is a brand new True Sports car that Scott Pruitt has. And then there, of course, the Galmer, the Rick Gallus car, designed by Alan Mertens. It made its debut this weekend.
It sure has, and you know, in preseason testing, there's been some concern whether it would be competitive enough. I talked to the team earlier this week, and they're excited about it. There was possible rumors they're looking at Lolas, but that's not the case. They're very excited about the new combination. Little Al is very excited about the new Galmar.
And then, of course, there are new teams. One of those, the car aptly named the Stars and Stripes. Jim Vassar at the wheel. Dennis Conner of America's Cup fame is one of the supporters on that car.
Well, the key here is we've got new blood in the sport. We've got interest from other areas of tough competition, and I think that's fun to see in IndyCar racing.
Well, as qualifying continues, anytime you have a new season, the learning curve with that new equipment can be a little large and very, very expensive, and it has been this weekend as well. Yesterday, Hiro Matsushita had this problem coming into one of the corners, airborne across the sand trap into the wall. He tried to practice this morning, but finally decided to withdraw. He was just too sore after that crash. And then the defending champion, the Pennzoil car of John Andretti, head on into the tire barrier coming through the chicane, but the barrier did its job. John Andretti, not injured, was able to climb out from under the tires. In fact, the car did race again. This is Danny Sullivan, that brand new Galmer, as he smacked it with the nose. Fortunately, car not badly injured, and he was back in action. Eddie Cheever actually did it twice, Tom.
Actually, 3 chicanes here in Australia, and it makes for a lot of excitement. The drivers have got to be very heads up.
Even our defending IndyCar world champion Michael Andretti was able to cut off the front right nose wing on his car as he got a little aggressive through the chicane.
Well, you know,
chicane's been changed since last year, but it's causing some trouble.
It is. They try to improve the track from a safety standpoint, but it's hard to make these tracks idiot-proof for these drivers.
All right, so qualifying. The final session is underway. In just a few minutes, we'll know who will earn the very first point of this season, and the chase to the championship will be underway. We're back live. Surfers Paradise, Australia. Emerson Fittipaldi in his qualifying runs, road racing qualifying here. He's second quick right now behind Michael Andretti, who has a new track record at the moment of 101.6 miles an hour and provisionally has the pole. It appears that Michael in that new car, new engine, may be the dominant force this season. Let's go down to the pits for some updated coverage on Michael. Covering in the pits as usual, he'll be with us all year, is Gary Gerald. Gary?
Paul, a couple of things to keep in mind. A bit of a surprise, a lot of eyebrows were raised after the great season that the Newman Haas team had last year. Michael Andretti, as you mentioned, won 8 events. He set numerous track records, dominated the season, won the championship in the final race at Laguna Seca. This year, they elected to go to the Ford Cosworth program, and a lot of people said, why are you going away from a tried, true, and proven program to now take the risk of the new program? But after nearly 5,000 in Indianapolis, Phoenix, Laguna Seca, Texas World Speedway, this team has really done a terrific job. They're brimming with confidence. He's been consistently fast in the 2 days here at Surfers Paradise. You mentioned he won the provisional pole yesterday, but problems in the early moments of this session. They came in after the opening lap. They changed the electronic box. They brought him in a second time and changed spark plugs. He's trying to sort it out on the track now, but they don't know if they've conquered the problem. His speed from yesterday at the moment is still standing up as the fastest thus far. Another major story involves Bobby Rahal. Big change for him this season. And also working with us again this year in the pits is our colleague Jan Beekes. He's standing by in the Bobby Rahal pit.
Thank you, Gary. Not only do we have new engines and new chassis, but we have new teams. Bobby Rahal has joined forces with Carl Hogan and formed Rahal Hogan Racing. Now, most of the team, as he fires the car up and they go out to run some more qualifying, most of the team is from the Patrick Racing team from last year, but he has also brought some people from the Gallus organization along with him. He has brought his crew chief, Jim Prescott, along with him, who's now been his crew chief for the last 12 seasons. They've done a lot of testing this winter, showed a lot of promise. They ran quickly yesterday, so it's a new name, but it is also a team with a lot of experience. Let's go back to the booth.
All right, well, you ride on board with Bobby Rahal. New colors on that car, the black and gold, but the helmet is, of course, the same that we always see on Bobby. He was second quick until a few moments ago, and then Michael Andretti was running in the fastest position. You're on board with Michael now, but Emerson Fittipaldi suddenly turned a very hot lap and moved into second place. That brought Rahal into the pits to think it over.
Well, I think what you're seeing is they're making small adjustments as they're qualifying. They're still testing because it's so early in the season.
And of course, as we've mentioned, that brand new Ford Cosworth XP engine on board this particular car, Michael Andretti's, and it is performing very well for him. Let's run down the lineup as it would be if qualifying were to end at this moment, and we're only a few minutes away as we go back on board with Bobby Rahal. The front row would be Michael Andretti on the pole with Emerson Fittipaldi alongside. The second row would be Bobby Rahal and Rick Mears with that new Chevy power plant in Rick's car. The third row would be Al Unser Jr., the new Galmer machine. machine. And Scott Goodyear, who yesterday said to me after his run, you know, it's so great. I have never had an opportunity to run a car that didn't overheat during a season. It's just so wonderful to run a qualifying session. Now, that's the famous number 14, but it's not A.J. Foyt, Tom.
No, it isn't. It's actually a neighbor of one of the designers of the Chevrolet over in England. Done a fantastic job. First time in the car for A.J. Foyt. Hopefully going to carry on a tradition.
Oh, and Foytek loses it just a little. Well, more than a little. Boy, he fought that one. Almost got it into the wall.
Well, he actually kept the engine running, which is very important. If you go dead in a qualifying session, they leave you there, and you miss out on your opportunities to move up in the field.
Live coverage of the final round of qualifying from Surfers Paradise as we see the famous number 14. And by the way, AJ has indicated he's going to do some racing this year, and he will be racing it at Phoenix, the very first run, and of course back at the Indy 500. Here's that situation again, Tom.
We've seen it all weekend. They lock up the rear brakes, get the car sideways, but he does a great job of car control here and gathers it up.
Comes around on him, he catches it again, and fortunately drives it to a stop without touching a thing. Well, the live qualification continues here at Surfers Paradise. Michael Andretti, with his track record, still has the pole, but there's still some time left. Fittipaldi is still outside the front row. There have been no changes in the top 10 thus far. Australia is a magnificent land of some most unusual animals. This magnificent heron. And of course, Australia is known for its nocturnal koala bear, who loves to munch on the eucalyptus trees here. There he is. Isn't he great?
Is that a shot of Andretti?
We'll have more of our coverage from here in Australia. The final round of qualifying, live right after this. We're back live with IndyCar qualifying from Surfers Paradise. You're on board with Eddie Cheever, who is currently 6th quick in the lineup. He also has that new Ford Cosworth engine and is trying to improve his time and opportunity to get into this field, but right now he would qualify for the 3rd row. And there is Mario Andretti just ahead of Eddie Cheever. You see the two of them coming through the chicane, and you see how aggressively they drive through that chicane here at Surfers Paradise. Now, for many teams, when the winter is over, that's an opportunity for them to relax. The off-season for the IndyCars is no relaxation whatsoever. What they do is test and develop all of their equipment and all of their techniques for the next season. Testing, developing the winning edge, is a long, lonely process. This is a session at Texas World Speedway with Eddie Cheever and the Chip Ganassi racing team. Each test is for a specific race.
This is an Indy test. I know it doesn't look like Indy around here. We're right in the middle of Texas, but we can work on the engines here. We've given the engines a much harder time than we would have done if we were running at Indy. And we're just trying to make sure, we're trying to get everything so that when we go to Indy, it's just an exercise. It's not something you have to do for the first time.
At a test, you're just continuously running. I mean, you get here at 7 in the morning and you see it's dark now, so you run continuously, and it's a lot more work because there's so many different things to try, and it's endless.
It's hard. I mean, we've been running speeds here in excess of 228 miles per hour average. And the mechanics have to work at the same pace it would be in a race. I have to make sure I run the car at the same pace it would be in a race. You have to just repeat things to make sure that you get them right. And it is tough. It's the hardest part of racing, but it is also the most important.
If you have a good test at the racetrack that you're testing at, when you go back there to race, you've already got a good baseline, and hopefully, you know, the first session when you're there racing it'll set the tone for the entire weekend usually.
If you work hard in testing, that makes your racing so much easier.
Of course, that last shot was of Morris Nunn, who has joined the Chip Ganassi racing team and Eddie Cheever this year. He should help immensely.
Well, I think so. There's no question about the technology involved today. Actually, it's easier for the driver to go testing than it used to be. You make a lot of changes, 1 or 2% difference is hard to tell from a driver's standpoint. But nowadays with the computers and the technology, they get the readouts in the pits, and it makes the driver's job a lot easier.
We continue our visual live of the qualifying here. The Ganassi team going to be one of those that will add to the excitement of this season. Another that always adds excitement is Penske. The name Rick Mears, the defending Indianapolis 500-mile race champion. Well, there may be a problem in that team in this qualifying session. Let's go down to Jan Vikas.
That's right, Paul. We've been keeping our eye on the Penske pits here because not only do they have a new chassis, but they have a new Chevrolet engine called the Indy XB engine. Rick Mears has just pulled the car in with some type of engine problem. They're not being specific right now, but he's pulled it in. He's speaking with the engineers. He's now also speaking with Roger Penske, the team owner. So right away, reliability could be a problem with the new Chevy Indy V8B engine.
Of course, that doesn't really mean that it's something to be concerned about except for the beginning of the season as we watch Al Unser Jr. Anytime you have new equipment, there's always run-in time. Right now, Rick Mears would qualify for the inside of the third row as we continue to watch qualifying with Al Unser Jr. on the circuit. And he has the fastest lap thus far. The beautiful beach here at Surfers Paradise, and take a look at the surf coming in. Any question why they call it a paradise for surfers here? We'll be back with more of our live coverage leading up to the very first race of the IndyCar season. Here from Surfers Paradise. Unser Jr. just rolled into the pits, but he did so after he turned a blistering pace at 101.9 miles an hour to take the provisional pole position away from Michael Andretti. Tom Sneva, that new Galmer is working.
Well, it obviously is. It's exciting to see. That's with the older model Chevrolet motor. It's not with the updated version, so they've obviously made some great strides in the chassis department.
And what happened there was, of course, when Al Unser Jr. moved to the top of the order, that pushed everyone else down. So right now, Michael Andretti is second. Emerson Fittipaldi continues on the course. He's just coming to the pits as well now for a final check before they head out for what hopefully for them and everyone is blistering final laps. There's Eddie Cheever as he sits by the side. And that looks to be the end of his qualifying run.
Well, it sure does. There won't be enough time to get him back to the pits and solve the problem, but it looks like all the wheels are in the car, so that's good news.
So Eddie Cheever stopped on the course, and as yet the kart officials have not decided whether or not to put out a yellow and try to get that off the course, but they are going to send one of the safety vehicles out, so they may slow this session for the time being. Let's go down to the pits. Update on Al Unser Jr. Here's Gary.
Well, Paul, you talked about the change. You talked about the fact that they're down on horsepower because they're staying with the old reliable Chevrolet power plant. It's not the new generation that Fittipaldi and Mears have, and Rick Gallis and his team are absolutely ecstatic. They were pleasantly surprised yesterday to be number 4 in the first day of qualifying. Now, little Al has put his name at the top of the list. So things are going much better than they had actually hoped to anticipate. And of course, little Al has the new teammate this year, Danny Sullivan. Danny very, very sore after that practice crash yesterday. He actually broke out one of the side panels with his left hip. It was that much of an impact. It didn't do that much damage to the car. It held up remarkably well. Sullivan struggling today, however, because he is very, very sore. He hopes to be in better shape for tomorrow's event. So a lot of optimism right now for the Gallis-Craco team. Paul?
And of course, as we had mentioned at starting, Hiro Matsushita had his problems yesterday. You saw the accident. Got into the barrier really hard with the nose, and several of the mechanics and engineers told me, Tom, that if it had been even a last-year car, that he probably would have suffered serious injury.
Well, it's good to see that they continually try to strive to make the cars safer, and we've come a long ways in the last 4 or 5 years. The cars are getting awful strong.
The real surprise here at the moment still remains Al Unser Jr. in a car that even its own designer, Alan Merton, says, well, it's not 100% by a long shot yet. I got a lot of work to do on the front end. We have a new front nose wing under design, but we think it'll work pretty good here. Works great right now. 101.9 miles an hour. That eclipses Michael Andretti's track record here set earlier in qualifying and puts Al Unser Jr. on the pole. Now let's go down to the pits once again on Jan Vikas.
All the focus, Paul, this weekend here in Australia has been on John Andretti. All the billboards you drive by, all the programs, they really concentrate on the champion from the previous season. So much of the spotlight have that accident we talked about. They're putting everything they have in here to try and get the car up to the front in the last remaining few minutes.
Of Of course, John Andretti scored the very first and, in fact, only IndyCar victory of his career at this race 1 year ago, and the Hall VDS team couldn't have been happier about that one.
No, they started the season off in tremendous fashion. Struggled a little bit of the rest of the season to come up with the same kind of performance they led the season off with. But any victory in this series is unbelievable.
Well, qualification has come to an end here at Surfers Paradise, and in the last moments, Al Unser Jr. was able to put his machine, a brand new one, on the pole, with Michael Andretti starting outside the front row. Like any IndyCar race, boy, you bring some money, you can buy all kinds of great souvenirs. And Surfers Paradise is loaded to the brim with them. I got a couple going home to my family, I'll tell you that. So the qualification is complete. Leading up to tomorrow's race, we'll be back with the conclusion of qualification in a moment. Well, I think we suggested this is going to be an incredibly exciting system. The qualifying here may have already indicated what kind of a season it's going to be, with Al Unser Jr. just at the last minute, maybe the last lap, and you saw it live, jumped up, eclipsed Michael Andretti's time. A new engine in Michael's car, a totally new car for Al Unser Jr.
Well, I think that's what's going to make this season so fun to watch progress, because there's so many different combinations. And what I was impressed by is little Al's car with the old reliable Chevrolet. Reportedly not as much horsepower, not as neat as aerodynamic package. They've come up with a nice combination with the new chassis. And street racing anyway, we'll have to see what happens on the big tracks, but they've got to be smiling in the Gallus pit right now.
And Michael Andretti, they decided to use last year's car, the new Lola, which is designed around the new Ford engine. Not really up to snuff from their point of view yet, so they're there, the new engine, the old chassis, and it might have helped things if they could have been in the new chassis. Let's go down to the pits and Gary Gerould.
He graciously has made a walk about 3 garages up so we could get him into our camera range before we go off the air. You have got to be ecstatic, because I think everybody was maybe a little surprised that you were going to be not only competitive, but to be on the pole.
Yeah, well, I'm just really happy for Alan Mertens and Rick Gallus. You know, this is their first race car, and Alan's first race car since the '88 March, and the Galmer's running super. All the guys did a great job. We've got 3 cars down here, which is really great, and the car ran good. You know, I was really happy with it, and so you know, we just got to get it ready for the race now.
In the older generation Chevrolet power plant, they're saying you may be down 40 horsepower to the Penske team or to the Ford Cosworths. Is that going to be a factor in the race tomorrow?
It very well could be, you know, because I took a lot of downforce off my car so that I could match the horsepower of those guys. And in doing that, my rear tires didn't last as long as they should. And so, you know, I was out there, we put together a good qualifying run, but again, that's only good for 1 or 2 laps, and my tires were shot. And so I'm a little bit worried about how tomorrow's race is going to be, on how I'm going to protect my rear tires, because I am going to have to put the downforce back in it, and hopefully that won't hurt me too much against the other power plants.
Terrific job thus far. A great way to start. You get the first point of the 1990 new season. Thanks, Al.
Great. Thank you very much.
All right, Paul.
Well, a fantastic accomplishment for Al Unser Jr. as he's on the pole for the weekend's race here at Surfers Paradise. Michael Andretti second quick. In the second row, it's Emerson Fittipaldi in the Penske and Bobby Rahal in that new team. Then Rick Mears and Mario Andretti in the next row. Eddie Cheever and Scott Pruitt will start side by side. Scott Goodyear and then Danny Sullivan. Then John Andretti and Scott Brayton, Gregor Fiotek and Tony Bentonhausen. Then Fabrizio Barbazza and Ted Prappes. So that's the lineup of most of the field looking ahead to the race. The Daikio IndyCar Grand Prix will have coverage Saturday night at midnight here on ESPN.